On October 22, 2025, a heavy tension gripped Washington, D.C. and financial centers across the globe. The city awoke to a sense of anticipation, as if the very air was charged with uncertainty. All eyes were fixed on the United States Supreme Court, which was set to deliver a historic ruling on Trump versus VOS selections, a landmark case challenging the sweeping tariffs imposed by President Trump. The outcome would reverberate far beyond the courtroom. The verdict would not only define the limits of presidential authority, but also send shockwaves through the global economy, affecting millions of lives and livelihoods. For months, markets had been on edge. Investors watched nervously as stocks swung wildly, wary of the legal battle's outcome and what it might mean for their portfolios. Would the tariffs, which had collected over $100 billion in revenue and reshaped global trade, be struck down in a single decision? Would the U.S. Treasury suddenly face a fiscal crisis, scrambling to fill a massive budget gap if the tariffs were overturned? News anchors spoke in hushed, urgent tones as stock tickers plunged from Tokyo to London, and uncertainty rippled through every major financial hub. At the heart of the case was a fundamental question: had the president overstepped constitutional powers, or was this within the executive's reach in times of economic crisis? In Illinois, the owners of Learning Resources, a small educational toy company, watched anxiously, fearing for their business and the jobs of their employees. Their future, like that of so many others, hung in the balance. Across the country, small businesses and families braced for the impact, uncertain whether relief or hardship would follow the court's decision. Outside the court, protesters from both sides gathered, union workers defending tariffs as vital job protection, while importers and business owners warned of rising costs and shrinking profit margins, their signs a testament to the stakes involved. The Supreme Court was not just ruling on trade policy, it was navigating the turbulent waters of American politics and economics, with the world watching every move. The world waited for an answer that would shape the future, as international journalists reported live and crowds pressed in for any sign of news. The stakes could not have been higher. In that moment, the fate of economies, businesses, and families rested on a single decision. A tariff is a tax placed on goods that are brought into a country from abroad, often collected at the border or port of entry. Tariffs have been used for centuries by governments around the world as a tool to influence trade and economic policy. They can be used to raise money for the government, protect local businesses and workers from foreign competition, or punish countries that are seen as trading unfairly. Sometimes tariffs are also used as leverage in international negotiations. President Trump made tariffs a signature part of his economic agenda, claiming that years of what he called bad deals had led to the decline of American manufacturing and the loss of millions of jobs. He argued that foreign countries were taking advantage of the U.S. and that something drastic needed to be done. To address these concerns, Trump imposed a baseline 10% tariff on nearly all U.S. trading partners, with some specific tariffs climbing as high as 50% on certain goods. This marked a dramatic shift in U.S. trade policy. Unlike previous tariffs that targeted only a handful of products, these new measures were sweeping and broad, impacting a wide range of goods, from French wine and Canadian timber to electronics, clothing, and even everyday household items. The Trump administration justified these actions by pointing to the large U.S. trade deficit, and even linked the policy to the fight against the fentanyl crisis, framing the tariffs as a response to a national emergency that threatened American lives and jobs. The ultimate goal was to pressure other countries to lower their own trade barriers, open their markets to American goods, and negotiate what the administration considered to be fairer, more balanced trade agreements. But not everyone agreed with this approach. Critics argued that tariffs ended up hurting American consumers and businesses the most, leading to higher prices on everyday goods and putting extra strain on small companies already struggling to compete. Importers faced a difficult decision: either absorb the extra costs themselves, which could threaten their survival, or pass those costs on to shoppers, making products more expensive for everyone. With so much at stake, the country was poised for a major showdown over trade policy, economic strategy, and the limits of presidential authority in shaping the nation's future. As the tariffs took effect, Americans across the country anxiously watched to see what the fallout would be and how it might reshape the economy for years to come. The legal battle at the heart of this case revolved around a fundamental question that has shaped American governance for centuries: who truly holds the power to tax in the United States, Congress, as the framers intended, or the President, through delegated authority and executive action? The Constitution explicitly grants Congress the authority to impose tariffs and collect taxes, but over the years, Congress has delegated some of its powers to the executive branch, blurring the lines of responsibility. The Trump administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, arguing that it provided the president with broad authority to impose tariffs during times of national emergency. Critics and legal scholars countered that IEEPA was never meant to give the president the power to tax imports, an authority the Constitution reserves for Congress alone. They pointed to the major questions doctrine, which holds that for issues of vast economic and political significance, Congress must clearly and unmistakably authorize presidential action. Lower courts sided with the challengers, ruling that IEEPA did not grant the president sweeping new tariff powers, and reaffirmed Congress's primary role in taxation. The administration appealed, warning that restricting executive authority could undermine the president's ability to respond swiftly to national security threats and international crises. Now the Supreme Court faced a defining test of the separation of powers, with the eyes of the nation watching closely. The court's decision would not only resolve this dispute, but also set a precedent that could shape the limits of presidential authority for generations to come. The Trump administration argued tariffs were vital for national security and economic sovereignty. They claimed unfair trade practices, especially by China, threatened American industry and stability. The administration linked tariffs to combating the fentanyl crisis, calling it a national emergency. This novel strategy tied public health directly to economic sanctions. The government insisted IEEPA was designed for such extraordinary threats, and that the president needed broad authority. They warned that restricting executive power would weaken America's hand in global negotiations. The case became a test of how far presidential emergency powers could stretch. While legal arguments raged, tariffs hit businesses and families hard. Small companies like Learning Resources faced price hikes up to 70%, threatening their survival. Industries from bicycles to furniture to seafood struggled with soaring costs. Businesses had to choose: absorb tariffs and risk closure, or raise prices and lose customers. Many delayed expansion, froze hiring, or laid off workers. For households, tariffs meant higher prices on everyday goods: clothing, electronics, appliances. Analysts estimated the average family would pay $1,200 to $2,800 more in 2025. The policy intended to protect workers often hurt them most, squeezing budgets and raising living costs. The real-world impact made the legal battle deeply personal. The debate was no longer abstract, it was about economic survival. The stakes were felt in every American home. America's abrupt shift to protectionism stunned allies and rivals alike. Long-standing partners like Canada, the EU, and Japan faced the same tariffs as adversaries. Retaliation was swift. The EU targeted U.S. products, Canada hit American steel, and China struck at U.S. agriculture. Trade wars erupted, disrupting supply chains and raising prices worldwide. Negotiations stalled as countries questioned America's reliability. The legal challenge became a global story, with foreign governments hoping the courts would rein in presidential power. The tariffs damaged not just economies, but also trust in U.S. leadership. President Trump remained defiant, insisting the pressure would yield better deals. Many global leaders saw the move as a retreat from cooperation to confrontation. The world order was shifting, with America's role in question. The outcome of the case would reverberate far beyond U.S. borders. On October 22, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict. In a 6-3 decision, the court struck down most of Trump's tariffs as unconstitutional. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that only Congress can impose taxes, including tariffs. The court found IEEPA did not grant the president sweeping tariff authority, especially on matters of major economic significance. The national security argument was rejected. Trade deficits and public health crises were deemed issues for Congress, not unilateral executive action. The ruling declared the tariffs illegal, opening the door for importers to seek refunds on $159 billion collected. The decision was a decisive check on presidential power and a victory for businesses. A new chapter in American trade policy had begun. The Supreme Court's decision reshaped the balance of power in Washington and the global economy. Markets rallied as tariffs were lifted, but uncertainty lingered. The president must now work with Congress on trade, promising more stability but also potential gridlock. The ruling reasserted congressional authority and set limits on emergency powers. Globally, the verdict signaled a return to rules-based trade, but trust in U.S. leadership had been shaken. Allies may now seek new alliances, wary of future unilateral moves. The U.S. faces a choice: pursue bipartisan cooperation or risk deeper division. The legal battle is over, but the debate over America's role in the world has only just begun.